think the importance, just when we started into Mark and recognized the kind of the setting and the time frame that Mark was writing in, and the hardship, the persecution that was going on, and just that aspect of needing to record the eyewitness accounts of Jesus, that Mark was maybe the first gospel author, that the Lord drew that attention to, the need to write these things down, to be able to pass them on. So just recognizing that importance of knowing the gospel message, and what better way is there to know it than to actually know God's word, the truth. And so that's sort of the purpose of embarking on this study is to follow through verse by verse what the Scripture is saying, and trying to get a grasp of the message. And of course we know that our God and Jesus cannot be put into a box, right? Our God is so awesome and so big that we like to come up with little ideas of what he's like, and then we read further and find out something else and something more and something greater, and so we want to just be open to doing that as we study his word. Last time, which was about 3 weeks ago, I guess, we were looking at Jesus' authority and how he spoke with authority to the demon and cast the demon out, and his fame, the fame of Jesus, was beginning to really take off, and people were coming to him. What we're going to start to read today, we're actually continuing the very same Sabbath day that we ended with a couple of weeks ago. So Jesus had been in the synagogue, and this is where the demon spoke out and called out, and Jesus cast that demon out. This is right after that Sabbath morning in the synagogue, and of course it's probably around noon, and the tradition, just the same as we do on Sundays, today at noon we go back and eat, right? So that's the point where we're at right now, where they're leaving the synagogue. So we're going to just start in, and we'll probably read we're taking on the rest of chapter 1 this morning, we hope. But we're going to read it in the 3 sections that are laid out. So we're going to start with Mark chapter 1, starting at verse 29 to 34, and we'll just start with that section first. We'll read that. So Mark chapter 1, verse 29. And immediately he left the synagogue and entered the house of Simon and Andrew. So this is Jesus it's speaking of, with James and John. Now, Simon's mother-in-law lay ill with a fever, and immediately they told him about her. We know that Mark likes that word, immediately. And he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up, and the fever left her, and she began to serve them. That evening at sundown, they brought to him all who were sick or oppressed by demons. And the whole city was gathered together at the door. And he healed many who were sick with various diseases, and cast out many demons. And he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. So, as I said, Jesus and the disciples who were with him at that point were leaving the synagogue, and they walked to Peter's house, and Peter and Andrew, and it's that house has been pretty much located. Most commentators say it's quite certain that the house has been located, and maybe Mom's not here, but Esther was probably at Peter's house, right? Yes. Yeah. Anybody who did the tour of Israel. Yeah. Okay. So it was just probably a minute. It wasn't very far from the synagogue, and they walked over there. The question arises: and some are one way and some are the other, but did Peter know she was sick? So some say that she had been ill for a while, it sounded like, and others that maybe she'd just been struck with a fever and Peter didn't know that till he got back home. So we don't really know. But if she was in bed with a fever, you would think she'd probably been a little bit sick for a while, because there'd be some kind of infection and this fever developing, and she was wiped right out, right? And the idea that she got up right away, like we read here that she got up and served them, is kind of interesting. I don't think that they were coming back to Peter's house expecting that his mother-in-law was going to be the one that would serve all of them, but we don't know. But just that desire that she had to get up and serve is a very good indication of that definite healing that took place, and that's the contrast to these days where we're not sure, where there's deception involved with faith healers that might say come and to a certain place and this will happen, and it's unfortunately a lot of deception used, which is a hindrance to the gospel. Then if people are saying they're standing up there healing in Jesus' name, and it's not truly Jesus' work, that's a hindrance to the gospel. But in this case, in all of these cases of Jesus healing, it was definite, it was witnessed, it was all over the place. It wasn't a certain location or whatever. He traveled from town to town, and just on the road, wherever they were, he just healed them instantly. And this healing is evidence of that. Just imagine for any of us, being sick with a fever, and the recovery usually for that takes quite a while. Like you probably don't even want to look at food, let alone start serving food. But she was able to get up and serve them, which is absolutely amazing, and showing that Jesus touched her, and instantly she was well. And it speaks of Jesus' touch, spiritually, Jesus' touch on our lives, his touch of grace on our lives, that when he moves into our life, the change is instant. Now we're not instantly perfect people, but that takes quite a while. But the change is there. We don't realize sometimes also the common grace that God has for all mankind. We know we speak of the grace of God in salvation, and sometimes God does physically heal people too, for sure. But also just to think of the common grace that we all, whether believers or not, benefit from God's grace to us, because we know that we don't deserve it, and no one deserves it, but that God is so gracious and patient with all mankind. Psalm 145, verse 8 and 9 say, "The Lord is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. The Lord is good to all, and his mercy is over all that he has made." So we think about the response. So our response to Jesus' touch. In this case, Peter's mother-in-law, she got up and began to serve them, as we were saying. As I was thinking about that last night, I know things have changed. Well, things are very different right now, obviously, but thinking of the joy that this woman had in serving these guys, which 4 of them are probably pretty big, hefty fishermen, so they could probably pack away a pretty good lunch, I would imagine. And we don't know who all was involved with them there, Jesus and the 4 of them, and possibly others coming in. But I was trying to capture that enjoyment, and I would remember a story that I think it was of my great-grandmother, and of course in her time it was feeding thrashing crews, and so that would be pretty similar to feeding a bunch of big fishermen, I would think. But again, the enjoyment she got out of that, and the story that I always remembered was, and I don't know who it was, I probably wouldn't have known anyway, that there was always this joke about a certain man that enjoyed her, what they called Johnny cake. So it was cornmeal cake, and he enjoyed that so much, and she knew that, and she'd be always pushing another piece towards him. Well, take another one, and then, "Oh no, Pearl, I know am I eating more than my share?" And then, but just the enjoyment she had in seeing him enjoy the whatever she'd put forward. So this woman just had that obviously about her that as we understand the Jewish customs, the food actually probably would have been prepared the day before the Sabbath, but there still was the serving of it and just getting them to eat that. Anyway, so then the next aspect of it in verse 32, telling us a pretty big hint here, that evening at sundown. So that in that time, that was marking the end of the day, the beginning of the next day was actually at sundown. So that's why we know that the rules and so on around the Sabbath had gotten very, very strict and overly demanding due to the Pharisees' rules and so on. But that's why everybody was just waiting. I mean, people had seen what happened in the synagogue, and then they probably heard the excitement going on, around Peter's house and so on. But they were just waiting till the Sabbath actually ended to start bringing their sick loved ones to Jesus. So that's why that happened in the evening. So restrictions were lifted. The Sabbath day restrictions were gone because the Sabbath was over. The news was out. People simply wanted to come. They wanted to bring loved ones to Jesus. The key here, and as we get into the next little passage, is to think about what people were coming for. People simply wanted something from Jesus, for the most part, right? And when you think about it, are we really any different today? When we think of the excitement, the emotion that night of all these healings, and demons are getting booted out, and blind eyes are seeing, and deaf are hearing, and lame are walking, but it's all about getting something from Jesus. In 35, we'll read on here in 35 to 39. And rising very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he departed and went out to a desolate place, and there he prayed. And Simon and those who were with him searched for him. And they found him and said to him, "Everyone is looking for you." And he said to them, "Let us go on to the next towns, that I may preach there also, for that is why I came out." And he went throughout all Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and casting out demons. So Jesus recognized the attitude that people had towards what was going on, like looking for something from him, but were they really understanding the truth and getting the message? In John 6, verse 26, Jesus says, this is right after feeding the 5,000, Jesus says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you are seeking me not because you saw signs, but because you ate your fill of the loaves." So as Jesus performs the miracles, it is a sign of who he is. And that's the main purpose of what he is doing. But people are looking for their own needs to be met. And then the disciples say, everyone is looking for you. They probably have, again, their own ideas of what could be accomplished, right? When they start to see those throngs of people following, they're kind of saying to Jesus, "We've got a good thing going on here. Just keep healing, and the people are coming. Look at all the people who are following you." But again, Jesus is saying that this healing work, is given as a sign, revealing who he is. But it also reveals the heart of God, right? The compassion that God has for us, actually in providing for our needs. But we must remember, as believers, we've only responded to Christ. He's the one who pursues us, right? It's not like we're going after him, because usually we're going the wrong direction. We're going our own way. And it's kind of like a baby calf. When a baby calf gets under a fence, maybe a couple days old, and they're out, cows are calving out on grass, and the baby calf gets under the fence and away from the mother, and of course the mother's all concerned to get her calf back, and it's usually lying like really tight, clumped up like this, and you kind of have to be careful what you do with that calf, because if you just approach that calf and come up to it and sort of try to push it, your mother's over here kind of thing, it's gone like that. It just looks like a flash, and a big ball, and always in the wrong direction, totally wrong direction. And you'd have to be faster than Ben Johnson to catch that thing at that point. But what you have to do is get in there and very quickly grab that thing in a great big bear hug and hold on, because then the feet are going, and it's and just hold it tight and let it settle down and bring it ahead to the mother. And I was thinking, isn't that so much like what God does to us, just grabbing hold of us in our wanting to go our own way, in our rebellion, and running off in always the wrong direction. Again, also looking back at 35, before we just leave this little section here, just that reminder again of Jesus going out to a desolate place, a quiet place, to pray. And if Jesus had to do that, it's a reminder for all of us. And I keep thinking of that for myself especially. How we get so busy and so preoccupied and just go and go and go and don't take that time to pray. And so we're thankful for those who seem to I don't know, have that ability or have that resolution to really pray. And I've been thinking of it lately and wanting, I don't know, if we could pull together a prayer journal that we all use or whatever, because there was one that I was looking at that I have of from another AGC church that they put together years ago, but it actually organizes your prayer time throughout the week. You know, we sit down to pray, and where do you start? Like, there's so many things, but the way they organized it in this prayer journal was to on Monday pray for family, we'll say, or Tuesday pray for friends and acquaintances, and on Wednesday pray for ministry leaders, or like just in a very organized way to be able to actually focus and be specific and not just oh Lord, please bless everybody today, and I got to get on my day, thank you. And it's something that's been on my heart to do, to be better at it, and to be more disciplined and so on. So just a reminder. And again, the purpose of prayer. So are we going to change God's mind? The purpose of prayer is to change us. And I found a neat illustration, which maybe is very outdated now, I guess, because of modern technology, but with all cameras on our phones and everything. But someone, well, apparently E. Stanley Jones, I'm not sure who he was, he used the illustration of that prayer is a time exposure to God. So using the photographic, and Nathan's here, professional photographer, the photographic illustration. Like our life, like a photographic plate, when exposed to God, progressively bears the image of God in keeping with the length of exposure. Isn't that interesting to think about that, of a time exposure, and that the more time we spend with God, how that His image is ingrained in us. I would suppose that we could also look at it the opposite way, that when we choose more exposure to this world, we obviously won't be bearing a very clear image of God at all, right? Romans 12, verse 1 and 2, this is in the Phillips translation. With eyes wide open to the mercies of God, I beg you, my brothers, as an act of intelligent worship, to give him your bodies as a living sacrifice, consecrated to him and acceptable by him. Don't let the world squeeze you into its mold, but let God remold your minds from within, so that you may prove in practice that the plan of God for you is good, meets all his demands, and moves toward the goal of true maturity. Okay, we'll move on to verses 40 to 45 here as we close out the chapter. And a leper came to him, imploring him, and kneeling, said to him, If you will, you can make me clean." Moved with pity, he stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, "I will, be clean." And immediately the leprosy left him, and he was made clean. And Jesus sternly charged him and sent him away at once and said to him, "See that you say nothing to anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer for your cleansing what Moses commanded, for proof to them." But he went out and began to talk freely about it and to spread the news, so that Jesus could no longer openly enter a town, but was out in desolate places, and people were coming to him from every quarter. Christ's miracles were parables. They not only proved who he was, showed who he was, but there's messages in them, and so the commentators point these out. Like healing the blind is speaking of the illumination of darkened hearts. Calming the storm is showing that there's peace for troubled hearts. Raising the dead, life-giving power. Feeding the 5,000, Jesus, the bread of life. And healing from leprosy, as we read here, deliverance from sin. Apart from Christ, we would be decaying forms of walking death. And leprosy, the disease of leprosy, well, I think they say there's maybe 70, there's different forms of leprosy, lots of different, but the severe one that we know that Jesus is healing here is now probably known as Hansen's disease, which was after a doctor in the 1800s, I guess, that actually kind of figured that out, what was happening. And the leprosy represents sin. The disease itself of leprosy is pretty drastic, and I mean you see pictures of lepers, and it's heartbreaking. And Dr. Paul Brand, not Paul Brandt, the singer, Dr. Paul Brand wrote a book about it. He worked with lepers and the effects, and of course, like Dr. Hansen probably was the one that kind of started to figure this out. It affects the nerves basically. So you lose your feeling. So that's why there'd be starting to lose fingers and toes and so on. Is just to not have that pain. And again, when we have pain, we want that pain to go away, right? But if you can't have any pain, then you're actually worse off. Yeah, like because so many things. And Dr. Paul Brand even had a young boy. Paul was trying to unlock a lock, and it was kind of jammed, and apparently he wasn't getting the key, wasn't turning, and a young boy, a leper, came up beside him, and I'll open that, and he just grabbed it and turned that key, and couldn't feel a thing, and it just actually pretty well ripped his finger, his skin right to the bone, like just. And he didn't know anything happened. The boy didn't, but the doctor could see, so just the devastation that it brings to the body, and thinking of those times. Of course, we read in Leviticus 13 and 14, and we know Leviticus can be a hard book to get through. It seems like a long reading, but. And boring, but then I think it was R.C. Sproul was pointing out if you're sick and and you're trying to figure out what, and you go to the doctor and you learn all these things of your illness, and the same thing back in those biblical days of having something on your skin and starting to wonder what this is. Chapters 13 and 14 get to be very interesting reading at that point, right? Really trying to figure out what is involved and what you can do. Anyway, so the leprosy acts as an anesthetic, bringing numbness to the extremities, and the devastation that follows from that, whether it's not realizing something is hot, not feeling that, burning, gripping something too tightly and injuring yourself, whether it's getting bitten or chewed and not even knowing, like in your sleep, not even knowing. And then, of course, the life of humiliation and isolation. Lepers in those times would have to dress, with wild hairdo and ripped clothes and keep distance, more than 6 feet distance, keep distance, and yell unclean, unclean, unclean as they were walking about, and it's just sad to think of and hard to imagine that of being a leper, being torn away from your family, from your loved ones, and thrown out in isolation. But again, as we said, thinking of that illustration of sin in our lives and the terrible things that it does, and it doesn't, we don't think of it affecting us that much, right? We think, oh, it's not so bad, and I may have this bad little habit, but it's not that bad. It's not hurting anyone, whatever. But not seeing, not feeling the devastation that it's actually bringing to us into our lives. We usually believe one of two lies. One is we don't realize that anything is wrong with us. We're not that bad. We're not that sinful. Or we go to the other extreme. We think that we are beyond help, that we are so disfigured by sin that nothing, no one can help us. And that, as I trust, as continue to look at the Gospel of Mark and how Jesus reaches into our lives, that he is the one that heals us in that spiritual sense. He can heal us physically too, and sometimes he does, but it's the spiritual, it's the eternal. This is what matters. And we know even those who were healed, that Jesus healed in these times, as we're reading, and Lazarus, he was raised from the dead. They still got sick and died, but Jesus is really speaking of the spiritual aspect of our lives, that we truly, desperately need him above all else.